Why is abstract art so terrible? If we're looking here at Salvador Dali's painting, I don't know, it's something about time, perspective of time. You might think, hey, this is kind of pointless. Why is there any use of making melted clocks? And what is this? A goose? And over here, there's just a random plank of something right next to the ocean that kind of looks similar. And there's just this ladybug watch which is way too flat. It doesn't make any sense, and this clock is just melting. Um, but one of the in order to understand the reason for abstract art and why it's so cool, um, you have to go back to earlier forms of art. So, for example, here we've got Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. Um, Very commonly in the past, you'd have like these kind of caricatures. It's all very flat looking. There's obviously a lot of painting talent and magical capabilities, especially with the tools they're working with at the time, that makes this so special. But if um, we go back in time, uh, if we go forward in time a little bit more, oh, okay. Um, there is a period where people do like realism. So here with Johannes Vermeer in 1665, this is after Da Vinci, um, you can see this portrait, and portraiture is kind of one of the popular reasons why people did art or what they got their commissions from. And back in the past, you wouldn't have a photo. So realism was super important after a point of religious symbology and doing things for the state and doing things for government and larger projects. You would have individual commissions that started to come out, which started to portray, um, things that people wanted, vanity projects. How do I actually appear? Who am I really? And so probably the commission was probably this woman, or it might have been the husband who wanted to remember her and always have some sort of beautiful way of representing her into the future, and it really does capture a likeness. So a lot of people would say, oh, I find this gorgeous and what an amazing painter because they represented something so realistically. But as you go forward in time, well, this isn't necessarily forward in time, but forward in time in regards to the the kind of stylings that started happening. If we look at Rembrandt, Rembrandt, he did things that were a little bit more unconventional. So instead of doing portraiture for just, what people wanted or whatever, he started to play around with techniques. So techniques like smudging things with his thumb and testing out different lighting schemes that sort of represent different moods that he wanted. So he started to do things for effect. This here is probably a little bit abstract, like there's a little demon here in the shadows, showing that this monk that's meditating is actually in some form facing demons, which is a little bit of religious symbology that's sort of come from the past. Then we go forward a little bit more ahead in time, so a couple hundred years, and we've got Monet. So we've gone from something that was religious to something that was realistic for vanity. And then we've gone forward a little bit more into something called Impressionism. And what Impressionism is it gives you the impression of how something feels or what what you see, but not with your eyes, but with your feelings and your emotions. So one of the magical things about Monet is if you will look at this, right here in the center, there is a focal point where there's much more clarity than you would expect to find. So in the rest of the painting, much broader out, you can see it's quite blurry. Like over in these sides, there's not much to that. And even sort of within this second sort of circle here, like this the the second third of the painting, while there's detail, it's it is progressively increasing in detail, but there's not tons of detail. But as soon as you get to the center here, the focal point, there is kind of like a lensing effect, just like in your eyes, that is displaying that, you can see and almost feel the textures of the lily pads. And it's a very famous painting because of how it evokes a feeling and a mood. And you're not really noticing that this bridge is, it's just a few strokes of a pen, not a pen, but a paintbrush. And yeah, it's just the foreground of something that helps take you back. So that when you're looking at this, it frames this little journey here right up the middle, allowing you to fall back. So Impressionism is a form of abstract art, or it is moving towards abstract art. So once we go a little bit further forward, we've got Vincent van Gogh. So this is, to anyone that looks at this, this feeling. You've gone out at a night, and there's that rich, warm lighting that's from the hustle and bustle of things, and it's just that nightlife, that feeling, that ambience. And look here, it's even less detail, less sophisticated brush strokes. You can just see that it's more about the color palette, how things are competing with one another and like complementing one another. So this sort of light blue purple is complementing the yellow, and uh, this hue of purple is also doing the same thing, and you've got like this cool purple over here as well. And so it's this contrast in colors that's helping you gain an emotion or a feeling. And all this other stuff, even though these shutters aren't really detailed, they're not meant to be details. They're just meant to suggest an idea, and this suggestion of perspective. It's much like Monet, but it's taken further, and this is called expressionism. So it's a good way of expressing very vivid emotions. Okay, so let's go forward a little bit more, and we get to Salvador Dali, 1931, and you're like, well, here you've lost me. Why would you do anything like this? Doesn't make any sense. Okay, maybe as an abstract sort of dreamscape, hellish nightmare kind of idea, it makes some sense. But why would you do this? It just looks like you don't know how to draw. So then you've gotten frustrated, you've given up, and this duck thing, you're just like, yeah, whatever. I'm just gonna accept this duck thing, and yeah, this version of perspective, I'll just accept that. Who cares? Whoa. Um, and yeah, I can see how people would think that, but obviously there's a lot of symbolism and things like that in here as well, and it's trying to evoke a mood. So if we went back to Vincent van Gogh, that's evoking a certain mood, a very pleasant mood, something that's realistic. But the real accomplishment in jumping from there to there is not so much the mood, because there is a mood captured here, and it doesn't need to be perfect to capture a mood. It's capturing a sort of strange feeling, a bending of expectation, wants, and desires that might start off very rigid and understandable, but all of a sudden it breaks down. And so, with the use of some symbols, some common symbols, it starts to create an expectation in which it starts to break. So it's breaking down whatever your expectation is, and to help some of that breakdown, some of the abstractness to different parts are tilting you away from viewing it logically. So it's trying to push you away from looking at it the same way you'd look at every other painting. So here, you're just naturally going to be pushed into the emotion, but with this one, it's taking it further so that you're trying not to see things literally anymore. Then we get to something like a Jackson Pollock, so 1952, and you look at this and you think, yeah, my baby could have created that. You might think that. But if you look at this, let's take a look at some of these colors. So we've got reds, we've got purples and blues. There's a white, and there's a kind of beige with a black background. So most of this actually has this beige and black tone. And then on top of this, you've got like these very kinetic motions of red and blue and white and yellow that are all playing with each other. And the general feeling of it is pleasant and interesting. Or you might have a different opinion, but it has some interesting ideas. And the reason I bring this one up is because I'm going to show where abstract art gets to and what actually makes it kind of a little bit different than useless, like most people think. Here we have Richard Schmid. So he's a great artist, great portraiture. This isn't a vanity project like Vermeer. This is a subject that he liked to paint. A girl that came around as one of his study subjects. And he would often blend what is the abstract with the real. And what you can see here is this stylization of the abstract to highlight the mood of something real. So it's not quite what you would have in Rembrandt's time, where it's just this kind of constant sort of breaking of a specific rule. It's not like with Monet, with this impressionism that is pretty consistent, just creating that mood or tone. It's not like Vincent van Gogh, which is just, it's all kind of expressionist. It's all broken up. This here it's a combination where you have clean edges and you have rough edges. You have a mixture that blends in, and this helps set up contrasts, like a white contrast at the back, the feeling of an effect or a detail that's behind it, which starts to take us more into modern day ideas of art and how art can be expressed, which is that abstract art can help give you ideas about how to represent a shadow shape or a form or the feeling of something in a background, where you don't need detail in order to highlight and bring out what is real and that expression, that feeling. So you can get a mixture of both. Let's go forward. This here is very modern. So this is, I think it's David Rico's take on Richard Schmid. So you can see these just, I guess they're probably not real people. It's just sort of idealized fantasy versions of it. But you can see the way that he's taking on a similar style, keeping it very moody to create that that sort of timeless vibe. And down here, I like these even better. So for example, on the street, you can see this. Lots of realism here, but there's also a lot of loose brush strokes and things that make this more interesting because of it. So here we've got these flowers. This is done almost like Claude Monet's flowers. And it helps work to drive you to the focal point, which is these people walking through. Or this gentleman, the abstractness of how this light is behind him is contrasting his form, which brings him out. The rest of the street being purple is contrasted with this larger section here with this yellow sort of hue of colors and this warmer orange, brown, red up this side. So warm and then cool. So what you can see is that as we get more into the modern day, there is more of an understanding between abstract and the real so that you can combine them in more and more interesting ways. Now, here we have some images from Arcane, which is a Netflix TV series, which is done by a lot of good artists. And essentially, in every scene, there is a composition or a compositional idea. There is contrast between colors, and there are ways to make things interesting with the abstract. So even here, there's this focal blur at the background, which then allows the character to pop. Or here, uh, there is this splay of colors and lights that is trying to add more of a chaotic emotion to this falling scene. Otherwise, it would just be, it's just a person in a sort of falling pose. Here you've got like the glimmer of light and just the composition of the background fading away so that your focus is drawn to what you're meant to be drawn to. Here it's evoking, wartime scenes with this sort of blur and you can feel the air whooshing through in order to give like a feeling or an experience. So much like Vincent van Gogh might do something like that to create something expressive, in modern day, you can express that in a more subtle way and you can express it more interestingly. So when it comes to abstract art, don't just necessarily think of it as, oh, that's abstract, that has no purpose. In here, you can look at colors, you can look at the connections between different things, and you can start to understand that this has a value just beyond uh, what it is as it stands. You can always use it to push artwork that exists now and adapt it and make it more interesting, more varied, and add more color and difference into what you're doing.